What if I told you that one of the most bizarre unsolved mysteries in aviation history didn't begin with chaos, but with something completely ordinary? A normal flight, a routine evening, a man who looked so unremarkable that no one on board could remember his face clearly enough to ever identify him again. This is the story of D.B. Cooper. And it is not just a story about a hijacking. It is a story about control, about precision, about silence, and about a man who stepped out of a moving airplane into the night sky and was never seen again.
It was November 24th, 1971. A day like any other in the United States. Thanksgiving week was approaching, airports were busy, people were traveling home. Flights were full, but routine. Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 was scheduled to fly from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. A short domestic flight, barely 30 minutes in the air. Nothing unusual, nothing special. Just another aircraft crossing the darkening sky of the Pacific Northwest. Passengers boarded normally, families took their seats, business travelers adjusted their coats. Flight attendants moved through the cabin with calm professionalism. Everything looked exactly like every other flight. And among those passengers was a man who would later become one of the most mysterious figures in modern history.
He sat quietly, dark suit, white shirt, black tie, sunglasses, neatly groomed hair, a calm expression that never changed. He did not draw attention. He did not behave strangely. He did not speak loudly. In fact, he blended in so well that many passengers later admitted they could not even recall his face. He purchased his ticket under the name Dan Cooper, a name that would later be misreported as D.B. Cooper due to a simple clerical error, a mistake that would forever define him in history. Because after that night, no one ever found the real man behind the name. The aircraft took off as scheduled. Engines roared. Runway lights disappeared beneath the wings. The plane climbed into the dark sky. Inside the cabin, everything was calm. Passengers read magazines. Some slept. Some stared out the window into the fading horizon. The hum of flight filled the air like a lullaby. No one suspected anything. No one felt danger. And yet, something was already in motion. Something quiet. Something deliberate. A few minutes after takeoff, the man ordered a drink. A bourbon and soda. Polite, calm, unhurried. He did not seem anxious. He did not seem nervous. He simply waited. When the flight attendant returned with his drink, he handed her a folded note. At first, she likely thought it was harmless. A phone number, a flirtation, something trivial. But when she read it, everything changed. The note said one thing. He had a bomb in his briefcase. There was no shouting, no panic, no immediate chaos. Just silence. Heavy silence. The kind that spreads before anyone understands what is happening. The flight attendant tried to process it. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was fake. But when she looked inside the briefcase, the illusion disappeared completely. Wires. A cylindrical device. A detonator-like object. It looked real enough to take seriously. And in that moment, everything on the plane changed. And yet, the man remained calm. This was the first detail that would later confuse investigators for decades. He was not aggressive. He was not erratic. He was not emotional. He was composed, controlled, almost like he had rehearsed this moment. he began stating his demands. $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and specific flight instructions. No unnecessary threats, no dramatic behavior, just clear requirements. Delivered like a business negotiation, not a crime. Authorities were immediately contacted. The airline notified the FBI, and a decision had to be made quickly. There were passengers on board. There was a possible explosive device, and no way to confirm the truth without risking lives. So they chose compliance. The aircraft was redirected to Seattle-Tacoma Airport. Emergency teams prepared on the ground. Negotiators coordinated the response. But something unexpected happened next. Once the plane landed, the hijacker made a surprising demand. All passengers were to be released. One by one, they walked off the aircraft, completely unaware of the gravity of what had just happened. To them, it was just a delay, just another inconvenience. They never realized they had been sitting next to one of the most infamous hijackers in history. But the man stayed behind, along with the crew. And on the ground, FBI agents prepared the ransom. $200,000 in small bills. Every serial number recorded, tracked, logged. 4 parachutes were also delivered. 2 main parachutes, 2 reserve parachutes. However, one of them was intentionally modified. A quiet attempt to reduce the hijacker's chances of survival. Hours passed. Negotiations continued. The tension inside the aircraft never disappeared. And then, the man agreed to continue, but under strict conditions. The aircraft was instructed to take off again. But this time, the route was different. Southward direction, low altitude, landing gear down, flaps adjusted, cabin pressure controlled. Every detail mattered. Every instruction was precise, and the pilots followed them carefully because they had no other choice. The plane lifted into the night once again, but this time, everything felt different. The atmosphere in the cockpit was heavy. The crew was silent. The passengers were gone, and only a few remained on board. The aircraft now flew over the Pacific Northwest, a vast region of dense forest, rough terrain, unpredictable weather, and darkness that stretched endlessly below. Rain began to fall. Turbulence increased. The aircraft shook slightly as it moved through unstable air. Inside the cabin, the man remained seated, calm, watching, waiting. And then, at some point during this flight, something happened that no one can fully reconstruct with certainty. The man stood up, collected the money, checked his parachute, and moved toward the rear of the aircraft. Every detail mattered. Every instruction was precise, and the pilots followed them carefully because they had no other choice. The plane lifted into the night once again, but this time, everything felt different. The atmosphere in the cockpit was heavy. The crew was silent. The passengers were gone, and only a few remained on board. The aircraft now flew over the Pacific Northwest, a vast region of dense forest, rough terrain, unpredictable weather, and darkness that stretched endlessly below. Rain began to fall. Turbulence increased. The aircraft shook slightly as it moved through unstable air. Inside the cabin, the man remained seated, calm, watching, waiting. And then, at some point during this flight, something happened that no one can fully reconstruct with certainty. The man stood up, collected the money. No one knows exactly what he was thinking at that moment. No recording captured it. No camera existed inside the cabin. Only fragmented eyewitness accounts remain. And then, the rear door opened. Cold air rushed into the cabin. Wind roared violently inside. The sound of engines mixed with the storm outside. The night sky was no longer peaceful. It was alive, dangerous, unforgiving. And in that moment, the man stepped into the darkness and jumped. $200,000 strapped to his body, one parachute on his back, a second parachute unused. Below him, nothing but forest, rain, and night. And then, he vanished. No confirmed sighting, no distress signal, no communication. No body recovered, no parachute found. Nothing. Just empty sky and silence. Checked his parachute and moved toward the rear of the aircraft. When the plane finally landed, everything changed. The FBI launched one of the largest investigations in its history. Media coverage exploded overnight. The name D.B. Cooper became national news. And one question dominated everything. Who was he? Investigators searched endlessly. Thousands of suspects were examined. Military veterans, parachutists, pilots, con artists, even random individuals who confessed years later. But none of them matched. None of them fit perfectly. The identity remained unknown. And what made the case even more disturbing was the complete lack of physical evidence. No body, no parachute, no confirmed crash site, nothing definitive. As if the man had simply disappeared into the night itself. Years passed, then decades. The FBI never fully closed the case, and theories only multiplied. Some believe he was a former military operative, someone trained in survival, navigation, and controlled risk operations. Others believe he was a pilot because of his detailed understanding of aircraft procedures. He knew exactly how to control the flight conditions. He knew what to request and when. Another theory suggests he was connected to intelligence work, a covert operative, someone who was never meant to be traced, someone who was meant to disappear. And then there is the simplest theory of all, that he did not survive. That the weather, the altitude, the forest, and the storm took him down. Silently. Without recovery. Without closure. But the problem is always the same. There is no proof, no confirmation, no final answer. And that is why this case still lives today. Because humans can accept crime, they can accept tragedy, but they struggle with uncertainty, with absence, with silence. D.B. Cooper became something more than a criminal. He became a symbol of disappearance, of mystery, of the impossible idea that someone could simply leave the system and never be found again. Even today, more than 50 years later, the FBI still has not officially solved the case. And every new generation discovers the same question. Who was D.B. Cooper? And where did he go after jumping from that plane? And maybe, just maybe, that question was never meant to be answered.